Hey guys, tonight you're waking up in a silk-draped chamber where your only job is pleasing an emperor you might see twice a year. There's a eunuch measuring your fingernails with a jade ruler. We'll get to why those fingernails could literally get you executed. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Congratulations. You've just opened your eyes as a concubine in the Forbidden City during the Qing Dynasty, and your life is about to become a carefully orchestrated nightmare of rules, rituals, and regulations that would make a modern prison warden weep with envy. You're not a wife. You're not a servant. You're something in between that exists purely for one man's pleasure in the production of potential heirs. And if you think that sounds like a cushy gig, think again. Your morning starts at 4 a.m. when a eunuch named Chun pokes you awake with a bamboo stick, not gently, the kind of poke that leaves bruises. You're not allowed to speak until you've been inspected, which involves standing naked while 3 different people examine every inch of your body for signs of disease, pregnancy, or unauthorized modification. Your fingernails, which must be exactly 1 inch long, are measured with that jade ruler. Too short means you've been biting them from stress, which shows weakness. Too long means you're getting ideas above your station. Either way, you're getting beaten. The inspection continues with your teeth, your hair, your feet, and places we won't discuss in detail, but involve a surprising amount of poking with metal instruments. If you pass inspection, you get to put on clothes. If you don't, you get to explain yourself to the head eunuch, which usually involves more beating and a day without food. This inspection happens every single morning for the rest of your life, assuming you live long enough to have a rest of your life. Once you're dressed in the regulation silk robes that cost more than most people's houses, but feel like wearing a straitjacket made of expensive fabric, you shuffle to the hall of mental cultivation for morning prayers. These aren't prayers for your soul or your family or world peace. These are prayers specifically thanking the emperor for allowing you to exist in his presence, followed by prayers asking for forgiveness for any impure thoughts you might have had while sleeping. The eunuchs listen carefully to make sure you're praying with sufficient enthusiasm. Mumbling gets you a day in the confession box, which is exactly what it sounds like and smells like rotting fish mixed with human sweat. Breakfast is a bowl of rice porridge with exactly 7 grains of rice, measured individually, and a cup of tea that's been blessed by no fewer than 3 different priests. You eat this while kneeling on a wooden floor that hasn't been swept since the Ming Dynasty, judging by the dust. The porridge tastes like water that's had rice whispered at it from across the room. The tea tastes like disappointment with hints of jasmine. You're not allowed to ask for more food, but you can request additional beatings if you're still hungry. After breakfast comes the daily lesson in imperial etiquette, which covers crucial topics like how to walk backwards while bowing, how to breathe quietly so you don't disturb the emperor's thoughts, and the 17 different ways to apologize for existing. You practice these skills on wooden dummies dressed as the emperor, and if you make a mistake, the dummy doesn't correct you. The eunuch with the bamboo stick does. These lessons last 4 hours and end when your knees give out or you start bleeding from the mouth, whichever comes first. The afternoon brings personal grooming time, which sounds relaxing until you realize it involves having your entire body scrubbed with brushes made from boar hair while 3 servants debate whether your eyebrows are symmetrical enough for imperial viewing. If they decide your eyebrows are inadequate, they pluck them out completely and draw new ones with ink made from crushed beetles. This process takes 2 hours and hurts exactly as much as you'd imagine. Having your face redecorated with insect paste would hurt. Your hair gets the same treatment, except instead of beetle ink, they use heated metal combs to curl it into elaborate shapes that represent various virtues like obedience, fertility, and the ability to suffer in silence. The metal combs are heated over an open flame until they're hot enough to brand cattle, then applied directly to your scalp. The smell of burning hair fills the air, mixing with the ever-present scent of incense and fear. If you flinch or cry out, they start over from the beginning. But wait, it gets worse. Your feet, assuming you're lucky enough to have avoided the bound foot tradition, still need daily attention. This involves soaking them in a mixture of herbs and vinegar that's supposed to keep them soft and attractive, but mostly just makes them smell like pickles. After the soaking comes the pedicure, which involves scraping off dead skin with sharpened shells while you try not to think about where those shells have been. The process leaves your feet raw and bleeding, but perfectly smooth for the emperor's theoretical enjoyment. Meanwhile, your hands get wrapped in silk gloves soaked in milk and honey, which sounds luxurious until you realize you have to wear them for 6 hours while they slowly ferment in the heat. By the time the gloves come off, your hands smell like spoiled dairy products and feel like you've been wearing wet socks on your fingers. The milk has usually curdled by then, leaving chunky white residue under your fingernails that you're not allowed to clean out because it's considered good luck. Of course, all of this preparation is for the slim possibility that the emperor might choose to visit you tonight. The odds of this happening are roughly equivalent to being struck by lightning while winning the lottery during a solar eclipse. The emperor has anywhere from 300 to 3,000 concubines, depending on how successful his recent military campaigns have been. And he's got about as much interest in your individual existence as you have in a specific grain of rice in your morning porridge. Which brings us to the ranking system, because nothing says dystopian nightmare like a detailed hierarchy of sexual servitude. At the bottom, you've got the Chongzi, who exists nearby. These women get to CI, which translates roughly to female the emperor never, live in rooms that be considered fit for dogs in size of closets, and eat food that wouldn't most civilizations. Above them are the Gui, who get slightly larger ren, or precious person's closets and food that's only mostly inedible. The hierarchy continues upward through increasingly ridiculous titles like virtuous lady, virtuous imperial concubine, and noble consort, each level bringing minor improvements in living conditions and major increases in the number of people trying to poison you. At the very top sits the empress, who gets to live in actual luxury while managing the constant threat of assassination from several hundred women who want her job. Your current rank is Chongzia High, which means you're basically furniture that occasionally gets dusted. Your room is a 6-foot by 6-foot cell with a bed made from wooden planks and a pillow stuffed with what you're told is goose feathers, but feels suspiciously like gravel. The walls are decorated with inspirational sayings like obedience brings joy and silence is golden. Speaking is death. There's a small window that looks out onto a brick wall and a chamber pot that gets emptied once a week, whether it needs it or not. Your daily routine continues with afternoon meditation, which involves sitting perfectly still while contemplating your unworthiness to breathe the same air as the emperor. This meditation takes place in a room heated to roughly the temperature of the surface of Mercury, while wearing those silk robes that don't breathe and smell like they've been stored in a tomb. You're not allowed to wipe away sweat because it suggests you're uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable suggests you're ungrateful, and being ungrateful suggests you need more education about proper attitude. The education comes in the form of lectures from elderly eunuchs who've spent their entire lives serving the imperial family and have strong opinions about everything from proper posture to the correct way to blink in the emperor's presence. These lectures cover topics like why your thoughts don't matter, the art of invisible existence, and advanced techniques for apologizing for things you haven't done yet. Taking notes is forbidden because writing materials might be used to send messages, and sending messages might lead to plotting, and plotting leads to everyone involved getting their heads separated from their necks. Let's talk about the medical care. Because even in a system designed to treat women like decorative objects, people still get sick. The imperial physicians are eunuchs who've studied traditional Chinese medicine for decades and have approximately zero experience treating women's health issues, because looking at a woman's body, even for medical reasons, is considered improper unless specifically ordered by the emperor. This means that when you inevitably develop health problems from the stress, malnutrition, and constant physical abuse, your treatment consists of herbal remedies prescribed by men who've never seen a female body and have no idea what they're treating. Got stomach problems from the terrible food and constant anxiety? Here's some ground tiger bone mixed with mercury. Developing infections from the daily grooming routine? Try this paste made from crushed pearls and lead powder. Feeling depressed about your life situation? Obviously, you need more bloodletting to balance your humors. The medical examinations themselves are conducted through a curtain, with you describing your symptoms to a doctor who's trying to diagnose you based on verbal descriptions and the color of your tongue, which he observes by having you stick it through a small hole in a screen. If you need any kind of physical examination, it's performed by elderly women who learned their medical knowledge from other elderly. Women in a centuries-long game of telephone that's gradually transformed. Apply pressure to stop bleeding and to rub this mysterious paste on everything and hope for the best. But the real medical nightmare comes during pregnancy, which is simultaneously the most important thing that can happen to you and the most dangerous. Getting pregnant means you might produce a male heir, which would elevate your status and improve your living conditions. It also means 9 months of being treated like a precious, fragile vase that might shatter if exposed to sunlight, fresh air, or any form of physical comfort. Pregnant concubines get moved to special quarters where they're monitored 24 hours a day by teams of eunuchs, midwives, and imperial physicians who argue constantly about proper prenatal care. Your diet gets restricted to foods that are supposed to promote male children, which mostly means rice, more rice, and occasionally some vegetables that have been blessed by priests and taste like they've been soaked in holy water, and regret. The birth itself takes place in a room that's been sealed off from the outside world to prevent evil spirits from interfering with the delivery. This means no fresh air, no natural light, and no escape from the smell of incense, sweat, and whatever herbal concoctions the midwives are burning to ensure a successful birth. The actual delivery is attended by a crowd of officials who need to witness the birth to verify its legitimacy, because nothing says intimate medical experience like having a dozen bureaucrats taking notes while you're in labor. If you're lucky enough to deliver a healthy male child, congratulations, your life just got slightly less awful. You'll be promoted in rank, moved to better quarters, and given access to improved food and medical care. If you deliver a female child, well, better luck next time, assuming there is a next time, and you don't die from the complications that the imperial physicians are completely unequipped to handle. Which brings us to the punishment system, because in a world where your entire existence revolves around pleasing one man who barely knows you exist, there are infinite ways to fail and creative punishments for each type of failure. Minor infractions, like speaking out of turn, making eye contact with a eunuch, or breathing too loudly during meditation, are handled with simple beatings, using bamboo rods that leave bruises, but don't cause permanent damage. More serious offenses, like being caught with writing materials, showing insufficient enthusiasm during prayers, or developing unauthorized friendships with other concubines, result in confinement to the punishment quarters. These are cells even smaller than your regular room, with no windows, no furniture except a wooden plank to sleep on, and meals that consist of rice water and disappointment. The punishment quarters smell like a combination of human waste, mold, and despair, which is appropriate because that's basically what their crimes, like attempting to send, made of. The most serious messages to the outside world showing disrespect for the emperor, or being suspected of plotting against other concubines, are handled with public punishment ceremonies. These take place in the main courtyard, where all the other concubines are forced to watch, as you're subjected to various forms of creative discipline that range from public humiliation to permanent disfigurement to death, depending on the severity of your crime and the emperor's mood that particular day. Of course, the definition of crime is flexible and depends largely on the whims of the eunuchs who supervise your daily life. Smiling too much can be interpreted as frivolity. Not smiling enough suggests depression and ingratitude. Walking too fast shows disrespect for the solemnity of palace life. Walking too slow suggests laziness. Eating your food too quickly implies greed. Eating too slowly suggests you're ungrateful for the emperor's generosity. There's literally no way to behave that can't be interpreted as some form of misconduct if the eunuchs decide they don't like you that particular day. And they have reasons not to like you that have nothing to do with your behavior. Maybe you remind them of someone they disliked. Maybe they're having a bad day and need someone to take it out on. Maybe they've been ordered to reduce the number of concubines and you're convenient. Maybe they just enjoy the power trip of making someone's life miserable. The reasons don't matter because there's no appeal process, no higher authority to complain to, and no escape from whatever punishment they decide you deserve. Meanwhile, your family back home has no idea what's happened to you since you entered the Forbidden City. They were probably told you'd been honored with selection as an imperial concubine, which sounds prestigious until you understand what it actually means. They might receive occasional reports that you're healthy and serving the emperor faithfully, but these reports are written by eunuchs who've never actually spoken to you, and are based entirely on whether you're still breathing and haven't been publicly executed yet. The isolation from your family and previous life is complete and permanent. You're not allowed to send letters, receive visitors, or maintain any connection to the world outside the palace walls. Your old life effectively ended the moment you walked through the gates, and your new life consists entirely of waiting for an emperor who will probably never notice you exist while being supervised by men who've been castrated specifically to ensure they can't develop personal relationships with any of the women they're guarding. Let's be clear about the eunuchs, because they're simultaneously your caretakers, supervisors, protectors, and primary source of daily misery. These are men who are castrated either as children or young adults, either voluntarily to gain access to palace employment or involuntarily as punishment for various crimes. The process of castration was brutal, involving the removal of everything, and had a mortality rate of roughly 30%. Those who survived were left with chronic health problems, hormonal imbalances, and understandable psychological issues. The eunuchs who ended up supervising concubines had risen through the palace hierarchy by demonstrating absolute loyalty to the emperor and complete ruthlessness in enforcing palace rules. They wielded enormous power within the Forbidden City and used that power to create elaborate systems of control that would make modern totalitarian regimes look like amateur hour. Every aspect of your daily life was monitored, regulated, and subject to their approval. But here's the thing about the eunuchs that makes your situation even more depressing than it already sounds. Many of them had been palace concubines themselves before their castration, either as punishment for some infraction or as a way of removing potential threats to imperial security. They knew exactly what you were going through because they'd been through it themselves, and their response to this shared experience was not sympathy, but a determination to make your life as miserable as theirs had been. The twisted psychology behind this system was that many eunuchs had once been beautiful young men themselves, selected for palace service specifically because of their attractiveness. The castration wasn't just physical mutilation. It was psychological warfare designed to create the perfect enforcers. Men who had lost everything they valued about themselves and channeled that rage into tormenting the women they were supposed to protect. Your head eunuch, Chun, exemplifies this perfectly. He was castrated at age 15 after being caught in a romantic relationship with a merchant's daughter. The emperor's father had him brought to the palace not as punishment, but as a reward for his beauty. 20 years later, Chun has perfected the art of making other people suffer for the crime of still having hope. He speaks in a voice that never rises above a whisper, but somehow carries more menace than screaming. When he's displeased with your behavior, which is most of the time, he doesn't hit you immediately. He waits, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. You never know when the punishment is coming, which means you're constantly terrified, which means you make more mistakes, which gives him more reasons to punish you. The other eunuchs follow Chun's lead because they've learned that showing mercy to concubines is interpreted as weakness, and weak eunuchs get demoted to cleaning chamber pots in the servants' quarters. So they compete to see who can devise the most creative punishments for minor infractions. Eunuch Lu specializes in making you hold uncomfortable positions for hours. Eunuch Wang prefers psychological torture, like making you recite lists of your personal failures until you break down crying. Eunuch Zhang just enjoys watching people suffer and doesn't bother with elaborate justifications. But the worst part about the eunuchs isn't their cruelty. It's their complete authority over every aspect of your existence. They decide when you eat, what you wear, where you go, who you speak to, and how you spend every minute of your day. They can have you beaten for any reason or no reason at all. They write the reports about your behavior that determine whether you get promoted or demoted in the concubine hierarchy. They control access to medical care, which means they can literally decide whether you live or die if you get seriously ill. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You can't complain to higher authorities because the eunuchs are the higher authorities in the women's quarters. You can't appeal their decisions because their decisions are considered final. You can't even try to win them over with good behavior because they interpret good behavior as manipulation and punish you for being too obvious about trying to please them. The system is designed to be completely impossible to navigate successfully, which keeps you in a constant state of anxiety and helplessness. Speaking of impossible navigation, let's discuss the social hierarchy among the concubines themselves. Because if you thought the eunuchs were bad, wait until you meet your fellow prisoners. The ranking system creates a situation where every woman in the palace is simultaneously your potential ally and your guaranteed enemy. The woman in the cell next to yours might help you through a difficult punishment today and poison your tea tomorrow if she thinks it will improve her chances of getting noticed by the emperor. The rankings start at the bottom with Chang Ziai, which is where you currently sit. Above you are the Gui Ren, who get rooms that are 7 feet by 7 feet instead of 6 by 6. And meals that include occasional pieces of actual meat instead of just the memory of meat. Above them are the Pin, who get furniture that isn't designed to cause physical pain and clothing that's been washed sometime in the current dynasty. The hierarchy continues upward through increasingly elaborate titles that correspond to incrementally better living conditions and exponentially increased danger from assassination attempts. Noble lady gets you a room with an actual window that looks out on something other than a brick wall. Virtuous consort means you get to eat sitting down instead of kneeling. Imperial noble consort comes with servants who only despise you instead of actively plotting your death. At the very top of the concubine hierarchy sits the noble consort of the first rank, who lives in luxury that would make European royalty jealous while managing constant attempts on her life from the several hundred women below her who want her position. She gets silk sheets, hot meals, jewelry, and the privilege of seeing the emperor maybe once a month instead of once a year. She also gets to spend her days wondering which of her food tasters is going to slip up and let the poison through. The competition between ranks is vicious because moving up even one level means significantly better treatment, while moving down means potentially fatal consequences. A Gui Ren who gets demoted back to Changzi AI doesn't just lose her slightly larger room and marginally better food. She becomes a target for every Changzi AI who sees her as competition and every eunuch who wants to make an example of what happens to women who fail to maintain their status. This creates an environment where forming genuine friendships is essentially impossible. The woman who comforts you after a beating might be the same woman who reports your private conversations to the eunuchs if she thinks it will earn her favor. A concubine who shares her extra rice with you when you're being punished with reduced rations might be calculating whether keeping you alive serves her interests or whether letting you starve removes competition. The promotion system makes everything worse because it's based entirely on the emperor's attention, which is distributed according to no logical pattern whatsoever. You might spend years perfecting your appearance, behavior, and skills only to watch someone get promoted simply because the emperor noticed her sneeze in an attractive way during a ceremony. Or you might be next in line for advancement when suddenly the emperor develops a preference for women who remind him of his childhood nurse, and your entire strategy becomes worthless overnight. Meanwhile, the demotion system is swift and brutal. Fall out of favor, and you can go from noble lady to Changzi AI in a single day. Commit a serious infraction, and you might find yourself in the punishment quarters or worse. Get accused of plotting against a higher-ranked concubine, and you could be executed before you have a chance to defend yourself. The fear of falling is constant and justified because the fall, when it comes, is usually fatal. Let's talk about the daily routine in more detail, because the horror isn't just in the big traumatic punishments. It's in the relentless, grinding misery of every ordinary day. After morning inspection and prayers, you report to your assigned work detail. Yes, even though you're supposedly being kept in luxury as the emperor's potential companion, you still have to work. The work assignments are designed to be both useful to the palace and humiliating to you. Changzi level concubines get the worst jobs. You might spend your morning sorting rice grains by size, which sounds simple until you realize that you're expected to sort several pounds of rice into categories that differ by fractions of an inch. And if the eunuchs find more than 3 misplaced grains in your finished work, you lose your afternoon meal and get to start over. Or you might be assigned to silkworm duty, which involves feeding thousands of silkworms individually while trying not to kill any of them, because dead silkworms come out of your food allowance. The afternoon work assignments are even worse. Laundry duty means spending 4 hours standing in cold water up to your elbows, scrubbing the silk robes of higher-ranked concubines with soap made from animal fat and wood ash. The soap burns your skin and the cold water gives you joint pain, but you're not allowed to wear gloves because gloves might snag the delicate fabric. By the end of laundry duty, your hands are raw and bleeding, but you still have to report for evening inspection with perfect fingernails and unmarked skin. Kitchen duty involves preparing meals for the other concubines while being forbidden to taste any of the food you're preparing. You spend hours chopping vegetables and seasoning dishes according to precise specifications, knowing that the food you're making is better than anything you'll be allowed to eat. The kitchen supervisors watch you constantly to make sure you don't sneak even a single grain of rice or drop of sauce. Getting caught sampling the food results in a day of fasting and a beating that leaves you unable to stand properly for a week. Garden maintenance means spending your work time bent over in uncomfortable positions, weeding flower beds and pruning plants while wearing silk robes that restrict your movement and make you sweat in the sun. The gardens are beautiful, which makes the work feel like torture because you're surrounded by lovely things you're not allowed to enjoy. You're there to maintain beauty for other people's pleasure, while your own appearance deteriorates from sun exposure and physical labor. But the cruelest work assignment is library duty, where you spend your time organizing books you're not allowed to read. The Imperial Library contains thousands of volumes of poetry, philosophy, history, and literature, representing centuries of human knowledge and creativity. Your job is to dust them, arrange them, and repair damaged pages while remaining completely illiterate by imperial decree. Concubines who are caught reading face immediate demotion and severe punishment, because educated women are considered dangerous to imperial authority. The work assignments rotate monthly, which means just as you're getting used to one form of misery, you're transferred to a different form of misery. This prevents you from developing any expertise or relationships that might make your situation more bearable. It also ensures that you never feel secure or comfortable, because you're constantly adapting to new forms of suffering. Evening activities after work include more etiquette training, but this time focusing on sexual techniques and bedroom behavior. These lessons are taught by elderly women who are former concubines themselves and have strong opinions about proper sexual performance. The instruction covers everything from how to undress in an appealing manner to how to fake enthusiasm convincingly. You practice these techniques on silk-covered dummies while the instructors critique your performance and offer helpful suggestions like more moaning and less obvious disgust. The sexual education also includes detailed instruction on how to maximize your chances of becoming pregnant with a male child. This involves dietary recommendations, specific sexual positions, and timing your encounters with the Emperor according to lunar cycles and astrological charts. You're taught to track your menstrual cycle obsessively and report any irregularities to the palace physicians, who will prescribe herbal remedies that usually make you feel worse than whatever problem you are trying to solve. But here's the thing about all this sexual preparation. The chances of actually using any of these skills are virtually zero. The Emperor has hundreds of concubines and maybe visits with a dozen of them per year. The selection process for imperial visits is mysterious and arbitrary, based on factors ranging from the Emperor's mood to astrological considerations to which concubines haven't been sick recently. Most concubines go their entire lives without ever being summoned to the Emperor's chambers. This means you spend hours every day learning sexual a man you'll never meet, and perf techniques you'll never use, practicing seduction methods, correcting bedroom skills for encounters that will never happen. It's psychological torture disguised as education, designed to keep you focused on a goal that's essentially impossible to achieve, while preventing you from developing any practical skills that might help you survive in the real world if you ever escape. The few concubines who do get selected for imperial visits face their own special nightmare. Being chosen sounds like winning the lottery until you realize that sexual performance with the Emperor is a high-stakes test where failure means demotion or death. You have one night to impress a man who's had access to the most beautiful and skilled women in the Empire since childhood. Your techniques have to be perfect. Your enthusiasm has to seem genuine, and your ability to produce a male heir has to manifest immediately. The pressure is so intense that many concubines who get summoned to the Emperor's chambers are physically unable to perform due to anxiety. This is interpreted as disrespect or inadequate preparation, leading to immediate punishment and permanent banishment from future consideration. Stories circulate among the concubines about women who were executed for failing to achieve orgasm convincingly enough, or for becoming pregnant with female children instead of male heirs. Even successful encounters with the Emperor don't guarantee improved conditions. Imperial attention is fickle, and a concubine who's favored 1 month might be forgotten the next when the Emperor develops new preferences or gets distracted by military campaigns. The temporary privileges that come with imperial favor, better food, nicer clothing, reduced work assignments, can disappear overnight. leaving you worse off than before because other concubines now see you as a threat. Let's discuss the medical situation in more detail, because the healthcare system in the Forbidden City makes medieval European medicine look advanced and humane. The palace physicians are highly educated men who've studied traditional Chinese medicine for decades and have absolutely no practical experience treating women, because examining female bodies is considered improper unless specifically ordered by the emperor for reproductive purposes. This means that when you develop health problems, which you inevitably will given the stress, poor nutrition, and constant physical abuse, your medical care consists of herbal remedies prescribed by doctors who are diagnosing you based on secondhand descriptions of your symptoms filtered through multiple layers of palace bureaucracy. The diagnostic process involves you describing your condition to a eunuch, who describes it to a female palace attendant, who describes it to another eunuch, who finally describes it to the physician. By the time your symptoms reach the doctor, they bear no resemblance to your actual condition. The treatments themselves are based on traditional Chinese medicine principles that emphasize balancing bodily humors through dietary changes and herbal remedies. This sounds reasonable until you realize that the herbs being prescribed haven't been tested for safety or effectiveness, and the dosages are determined by consulting ancient texts rather than observing patient responses. Common treatments include mercury compounds for skin problems, lead-based powders for digestive issues, and bloodletting for basically everything else. The side effects of these treatments are often worse than the original problems. Mercury poisoning causes tremors, hair loss, and organ damage. Lead poisoning leads to abdominal pain, cognitive impairment, and eventual death. Bloodletting weakens already malnourished women and makes them more susceptible to infections. But since the physicians never actually see their patients or monitor treatment outcomes, these side effects are interpreted as new symptoms requiring additional treatment rather than evidence that the original treatment was harmful. Gynecological care is particularly horrifying because it involves intimate medical procedures performed by people who aren't allowed to look at or touch women's bodies. Pregnancy examinations are conducted by having you describe your symptoms, while an elderly female attendant pokes at your abdomen through layers of silk cloth. Labor and delivery take place in rooms sealed off from outside air to prevent evil spirits from interfering, which means no ventilation, no sanitation, and no escape from the smell of blood, sweat, and whatever herbal concoctions the midwives are burning to ensure successful birth. The maternal mortality rate in the Forbidden City is astronomical, not because the midwives lack skill, but because the system prevents them from providing effective care. They're not allowed to use metal instruments because metal might harm the imperial heir. They can't provide pain relief because suffering in childbirth is considered natural and appropriate. They're forbidden from intervening in difficult births because interfering with nature might anger the gods. Most childbirth complications that would be easily treatable today result in death for both mother and child. Mental health care doesn't exist as a concept because psychological distress is interpreted as spiritual weakness rather than medical condition. Depression, anxiety, and other stress-related disorders are treated with moral instruction rather than medical intervention. Concubines who develop serious mental health problems are usually transferred to the punishment quarters, where their condition deteriorates until they either recover through sheer willpower or die from neglect. The dental care situation deserves special mention because tooth problems are incredibly common due to the poor diet and high stress levels. But treatment options are limited to tooth extraction using crude metal tools and no anesthesia. Dental procedures are performed by palace barbers who learned their skills through apprenticeship rather than formal medical training. The instruments aren't sterilized between patients, leading to frequent infections that often prove fatal. Many concubines prefer to suffer with severe tooth pain rather than risk the extraction procedure. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of palace medical care is that the physicians are more concerned with protecting themselves from accusations of impropriety than with actually helping their patients. They prescribe treatments based on what will look appropriate in their official reports, rather than what might actually be effective. They avoid any procedures that might be interpreted as too intimate or invasive, even when such procedures would be medically necessary. Their primary goal is maintaining their own positions within the palace hierarchy, and patient welfare is a distant secondary consideration. The result is a medical system that provides the appearance of sophisticated healthcare while actually delivering treatments that are often more harmful than no treatment at all. Concubines learn to hide their health problems rather than seek medical attention, because medical attention usually makes things worse. They develop their own informal networks for sharing folk remedies and basic medical knowledge. But these networks have to operate in secret because unauthorized medical practice is considered a serious offense. And that brings us to the communication system within the women's quarters. Because in a world where speaking the wrong words can get you executed, the ability to share information becomes a matter of survival. The concubines develop elaborate systems of nonverbal communication that allow them to share warnings, gossip, and practical information without attracting the attention of the eunuchs who monitor their every interaction. The most basic level of concubine communication involves subtle changes in posture, clothing arrangement, and facial expressions that convey simple messages. A particular way of folding your hands might indicate that a certain eunuch is in a bad mood and should be avoided. A specific arrangement of hair ornaments could warn other concubines that a particular food has been contaminated, or that a certain area of the palace is under increased surveillance. More complex information is shared through seemingly innocent activities like embroidery patterns, flower arrangements, and calligraphy practice. A concubine might embroider specific symbols into her clothing to indicate which higher-ranked women are plotting against each other. Garden work provides opportunities to leave coded messages using the arrangement of stones or the placement of certain flowers. Even the way tea is served can carry information about changing political alliances within the palace hierarchy. The most sophisticated communication network involves the servants and lower-level palace staff who move freely between different areas of the compound. These women, who are technically outranked by concubines but have more practical freedom, serve as messengers and information brokers. They carry news about imperial politics, changes in palace policy, and warnings about impending crackdowns on concubine behavior. In exchange, concubines provide them with small gifts, promises of future favor if their status improves, and access to higher quality food and clothing. But even these communication networks are dangerous because the eunuchs are aware of their existence and constantly work to infiltrate and disrupt them. Some servants are actually informants who report concubine communications back to palace authorities. Some concubines pretend to be allies while actually gathering information to use against their supposed friends. The paranoia created by this surveillance makes it difficult to trust anyone completely, which isolates concubines and makes them more dependent on their official supervisors for basic human contact. The punishment for being caught participating in unauthorized communication ranges from reduced food rations to public beating to transfer to the punishment quarters. Serious communication infractions, like being caught sharing information about imperial politics or organizing resistance to palace policies, can result in execution. The fear of these punishments keeps most concubines from participating in communication networks, which means they remain isolated and uninformed about developments that might affect their survival. This isolation is one of the most psychologically devastating aspects of concubine life, because humans are social creatures who need connection and communication to maintain mental health. The combination of physical confinement, constant surveillance, and restricted communication creates conditions that would be recognized today as psychological torture. Many concubines develop symptoms similar to what modern psychologists would diagnose as severe depression, anxiety disorders, and post-traumatic stress syndrome. The palace authorities understand the psychological effects of isolation and use them deliberately as a control mechanism. Concubines who are emotionally broken and mentally unstable are easier to manage, and women who maintain strong social connections and emotional resilience. The system is designed to crush the human spirit systematically, creating a population of women who are too damaged and demoralized to organize effective resistance to their treatment. And this psychological warfare extends into every aspect of your daily existence, including the elaborate ritual of tea service, which sounds pleasant until you realize it's actually another opportunity for public humiliation disguised as cultural refinement. Tea ceremony happens twice daily, once after morning prayers and once before evening meditation, and it involves precise movements, specific postures, and exact timing that must be executed flawlessly while kneeling on wooden floors that haven't been cleaned since the last dynasty. The tea itself is prepared by higher-ranked concubines and served to lower-ranked ones as a demonstration of hierarchy. As a Changzai, you're at the bottom of this food chain, which means you receive your tea last, after it's gone cold, and you're expected to express gratitude for the privilege of drinking bitter, lukewarm liquid that tastes like disappointment mixed with jasmine. The tea bowls are deliberately small, holding maybe 2 sips worth of liquid, but the ceremony requires you to make these 2 sips last exactly 15 minutes while maintaining perfect posture and an expression of serene appreciation. The serving ritual involves 17 different steps, each of which can be performed incorrectly and result in punishment. Hold the bowl wrong, and you get a bamboo stick across your knuckles. Drink too fast, and you lose your next meal. Show insufficient appreciation for the tea's quality, and you spend the night in meditation position, contemplating your ingratitude. The eunuchs circulate during tea service with clipboards, taking notes on each concubine's performance and looking for violations of protocol that can be used to justify punishment later. But the real torture of tea service isn't the complicated rules or the terrible tea. It's the forced interaction with other concubines who are simultaneously your only human contact and your primary competition for survival. You sit in circles based on rank, which means you're surrounded by other Changzai who are just as desperate and frightened as you are, while being watched by higher-ranked concubines who view you as potential threats to their positions. The conversation during tea service is strictly regulated and monitored. You're allowed to discuss the weather, express gratitude for imperial benevolence, and share uplifting thoughts about serving the emperor. Any other topics are forbidden, which means you can't talk about your health problems, your family, your fears, your hopes, or anything else that might create genuine human connection. The result is 30 minutes of stilted, artificial conversation that leaves you feeling more isolated than if you'd spent the time in complete silence. And then there's the bathroom situation, which deserves its own special category of horror, because even basic human dignity gets stripped away when you're an imperial concubine. The facilities consist of wooden boxes placed over ceramic pots, located in a communal room that accommodates 12 women simultaneously, with no privacy barriers between the positions. The smell is indescribable, a combination of human waste, disinfectant made from fermented herbs, and the fierce sweat of women who are desperately trying to complete their business quickly enough to avoid drawing attention. Using the facilities requires permission from a eunuch, who escorts you to the bathroom and waits outside to ensure you don't spend too much time in there or engage in unauthorized conversation with other concubines. The time limit for bathroom visits is strictly enforced, roughly 2 minutes for urination and 5 minutes for defecation, timed with an hourglass by the supervising eunuch. If you exceed your allotted time, you lose bathroom privileges for the rest of the day and have to use a chamber pot in your cell, which gets emptied once a week, whether it needs it or not. The toilet paper is made from rough hemp, cloth that's been used by previous occupants and washed in cold water with soap that's mostly animal fat and wood ash. This cleaning process removes some of the visible contamination, but leaves the cloth stained, smelly, and harsh enough to cause bleeding if you're not careful. Many concubines develop chronic infections from the unsanitary conditions, but requesting medical attention for bathroom-related problems is considered improper and usually results in punishment for discussing inappropriate topics. Personal hygiene becomes an ongoing nightmare when your access to washing facilities is limited to once per week and the soap provided is designed to remove stains from silk clothing rather than cleaned human skin. The weekly bath takes place in a communal tub filled with water that's been heated by dumping hot stones into it, which means the temperature varies from scalding at one end to cold at the other, and the water itself has been used by several other concubines before it gets to you. The bathing process is supervised by elderly female attendants who scrub you with brushes made from pig bristles, while commenting critically on your physical condition. They're looking for signs of disease, pregnancy, self-harm, or unauthorized modifications to your appearance, and they report their findings to the eunuchs, who use this information to make decisions about your daily treatment. The scrubbing is thorough enough to remove several layers of skin, along with the dirt, leaving you raw and bleeding, but technically clean according to palace standards. Your hair gets washed with a mixture of soap and herbs that's supposed to make it shiny and fragrant, but mostly just makes it smell like wet sheep. The washing process involves having your head held under water while attendants work the soap through your hair with their fingers, occasionally forgetting that you need to breathe. The rinsing process uses the same communal bathwater, which by this point is cloudy with soap residue, and whatever the previous bathers brought with them. After bathing, you're inspected again to make sure the washing process didn't reveal any hidden problems, then dressed in clean clothing that's been worn by other concubines and washed in the same harsh soap that was used on your body. The clean clothes smell like lye and feel like they've been treated with starch made from tree bark, which they probably have been. They're also slightly damp because the laundry facilities don't include proper drying equipment, just areas where wet clothing is hung in poorly ventilated rooms until it stops dripping. But even this weekly bath is a luxury compared to the daily grooming requirements that are designed to keep you looking presentable for the theoretical possibility of imperial inspection. Your fingernails must be exactly 1 inch long, shaped into perfect ovals, and painted with lacquer made from tree sap mixed with crushed insects. The lacquer application process takes 2 hours and involves multiple coats that must dry completely between applications, during which time you're not allowed to move your hands or touch anything. The nail painting is done by servants who learned their technique through apprenticeship and have strong opinions about proper nail aesthetics. They critique your nail beds, cuticles, and finger shape while applying the lacquer, offering helpful suggestions like your hands are too small for imperial preference and these fingers look like they belong to a peasant. If they make a mistake during the painting process, they remove all the lacquer with a solvent that burns your skin and start over from the beginning, which can extend the process to 4 or 5 hours. Your toenails receive similar attention, but since feet are considered private parts, the pedicure process takes place behind screens with only your feet visible to the servants doing the work. This makes the process even more uncomfortable because you can't see what they're doing, and they can't see your reactions to determine if they're causing pain or injury. The result is frequent accidents involving sharp tools and tender skin, leading to infections that go untreated because foot problems are considered too embarrassing to discuss with palace physicians. Dental care consists of chewing on twigs from specific trees that are supposed to clean your teeth and freshen your breath, but mostly just leave splinters in your gums and make your mouth taste like bitter bark. The twigs are distributed once per week and must last until the next distribution, which means rationing your dental care and hoping your teeth don't develop problems that require actual treatment. Toothaches are treated with herbal pastes that numb the pain temporarily, but don't address underlying problems, leading to abscesses and infections that can spread to other parts of your body. The hair styling process is even more elaborate than nail care and takes place daily, whether your hair needs attention or not. Your hair is combed with ivory combs that are heated over open flames until they're hot enough to cause burns, then applied to your scalp to create elaborate curls and waves that represent various imperial virtues. The hot combs frequently cause burns and blisters, but showing pain during the styling process is interpreted as vanity and results in punishment for caring too much about your appearance. The hairstyles themselves are so complex and rigid that they require structural support from wireframes, wooden pins, and liberal applications of wax made from beeswax mixed with animal fat. Once your hair is styled, it's essentially frozen in place until the next styling session, which means sleeping with your head positioned to avoid disturbing the arrangement. This leads to chronic neck pain and frequent headaches, but complaining about hairstyle-related discomfort is considered frivolous and usually ignored. Hair ornaments are assigned based on your rank in the concubine hierarchy, with Changjiai receiving simple wooden pins, while higher-ranked concubines get elaborate decorations made from jade, gold, and precious stones. The ornaments are heavy enough to cause neck strain and are often sharp enough to cause cuts if they shift during normal movement. They're also considered imperial property, which means losing or damaging an ornament results in financial penalties deducted from your already minimal food allowance. The makeup application process is equally torturous and involves covering your entire face with white powder made from crushed rice mixed with lead compounds. The lead-based makeup is supposed to create the pale complexion that's considered beautiful in imperial court, but it also causes skin damage, hair loss, and gradual poisoning that affects your nervous system. The application process takes an hour and requires you to sit perfectly still while servants paint your face with brushes made from cat hair. Your eyebrows are completely plucked out and replaced with painted versions that are supposed to look more symmetrical and refined than natural eyebrows. The plucking process is painful and leaves your forehead raw and inflamed, but the painted eyebrows have to be applied before the inflammation goes down, which means painting makeup onto open wounds with brushes that haven't been cleaned since the previous user. The painted eyebrows frequently become infected, leading to scarring that makes future eyebrow painting even more painful. Lip color is applied using a mixture of crushed berries and animal blood that's supposed to create an attractive red color, but mostly just makes your lips look like you've been eating raw meat. The mixture tastes exactly as disgusting as it sounds, and has to be reapplied throughout the day because it wears off quickly. The constant reapplication means your lips are always slightly sticky and attract insects, which you're not allowed to brush away because disturbing your makeup is considered improper. The final step in the daily grooming process involves applying perfume made from flowers that have been soaked in animal urine and fermented for months. The perfume is supposed to create an attractive scent that will please the emperor if he ever notices you, but mostly just makes you smell like a flower garden that's been used as a public toilet. The perfume is applied liberally to your neck, wrists, and clothing, ensuring that you can't escape the smell even if you wanted to. All of this daily grooming takes approximately 4 hours and must be completed before you're allowed to eat breakfast, which means getting up at dawn to start the process. The grooming is supervised by the same eunuchs who monitor every other aspect of your daily life, and they take notes on your compliance with beauty standards that are used to determine your eligibility for imperial attention. Poor grooming results in punishment, but excessive attention to grooming is also punishable because it suggests vanity and self-absorption. The clothing requirements add another layer of complexity to your daily routine because each rank of concubine has specific colors, fabrics, and styles that must be worn correctly to avoid violating palace protocol. Changzai are required to wear gray silk robes with white trim, no jewelry except for wooden hairpins, and shoes made from cloth rather than leather. The robes are designed to be attractive, but not too attractive, modest but not dowdy, expensive but not ostentatious, and comfortable but not so comfortable that you might forget your place in the hierarchy. The silk fabric is beautiful, but completely impractical for daily wear because it stains easily, tears if you move wrong, and requires constant maintenance to keep it looking acceptable. The robes are also designed to restrict movement, with tight sleeves that make it difficult to lift your arms and long skirts that make walking quickly impossible. This ensures that you move with the slow, deliberate pace that's considered appropriate for imperial concubines. But it also makes it difficult to escape quickly if you're being chased by angry eunuchs or other concubines. The shoes are even more impractical than the robes because they're made from cloth that provides no support for your feet and soles that are thin enough to feel every pebble in the palace pathways. Walking in these shoes for extended periods causes foot pain and blisters, but wearing different shoes or modifying the required footwear results in punishment for violating dress codes. Many concubines develop chronic foot problems from the inadequate footwear, but requesting medical attention for foot pain is considered frivolous and usually ignored. The undergarments situation deserves special mention because they're designed to be as uncomfortable as possible while still technically covering your body. The underrobe is made from rough linen that hasn't been properly processed and feels like wearing a sack made from tree bark. It's cut to fit poorly, with seams in places that cause chafing and openings that don't align with your body's natural contours. The fabric is also treated with substances that are supposed to prevent insect infestations, but mostly just make it smell, like mothballs mixed with vinegar. Over the underrobe goes a corset-like garment that's designed to create the desired silhouette for imperial concubines, which apparently involves compressing your ribcage until breathing becomes difficult, and pushing your breasts into shapes that don't occur naturally. The corset is made from whalebone and leather, fastened with metal clasps that pinch your skin if they're adjusted incorrectly, and padded with materials that become soggy and smelly when they absorb sweat. Wearing the corset for extended periods causes difficulty breathing, back pain, and digestive problems, but removing it without permission is forbidden and results in punishment for indecency. The outer robe goes over the corset and is supposed to create an impression of effortless elegance, while concealing the structural undergarments that make the silhouette possible. The robe is heavy enough to cause shoulder strain, long enough to trip over if you're not careful, and decorated with embroidery that catches on everything you pass. The embroidered decorations are also meaningful, with specific patterns that indicate your rank, your current favor status, and your availability for imperial attention. Wearing the wrong embroidery pattern or allowing the decorations to become damaged results in punishment for misrepresenting your status. The daily process of getting dressed requires assistance from servants because the clothing is too complex to put on correctly without help, but the servants assigned to assist Changzai level concubines are usually other concubines who are being punished and resent having to perform menial labor. They're deliberately rough during the dressing process, pulling laces too tight, pinching skin while fastening clasps, and making critical comments about your body while they work. The dressing process becomes another opportunity for humiliation and physical discomfort disguised as necessary assistance. And speaking of servants, let's discuss the hierarchy among the palace staff, because even the people who are technically supposed to serve you actually outrank you in practical authority and treat you accordingly. The servant women who help with dressing, grooming, and daily maintenance are usually former concubines who have been demoted due to age, illness, or disciplinary problems, which means they know exactly how miserable your life is and take pleasure in making it slightly worse whenever possible. These women have lost everything they once hoped to achieve in the palace system, and their response to this loss is to take out their frustration on the concubines, who still have theoretical chances for advancement. They're deliberately slow when you need help quickly, rough when gentleness is required, and critical when you're already feeling vulnerable. They also serve as informants for the eunuchs, reporting on conversations they overhear, behavior they observe, and any signs of discontent or rebellion among the concubines they're supposed to assist. The kitchen servants who prepare your meals have even more opportunity to make your life miserable because they control the quality and quantity of food you receive. They can make your already minimal rations even smaller by claiming you violated some minor protocol, or they can improve your meals slightly if they think it will earn them favor with higher authorities. The food itself is prepared according to strict guidelines that prioritize symbolic meaning over nutritional value or taste, which means your meals are designed to reinforce your low status rather than keep you healthy. The laundry servants who wash your clothing have the power to ruin your appearance by damaging your garments or failing to clean them properly. Since you're only allowed one set of clothing at a time, damage to your robes means wearing torn or stained garments until replacement clothing becomes available, which can take weeks or months depending on your status and behavior record. The laundry servants know this and use clothing damage as a way to punish concubines they dislike, or to curry favor with eunuchs by creating opportunities for disciplinary action. The cleaning servants who maintain the palace buildings and grounds have access to all areas of the complex and serve as the primary intelligence network for palace gossip and political maneuvering. They know which concubines are being considered for promotion, which ones are falling out of favor, and which ones are being investigated for various infractions. This information is valuable currency in the palace economy, and cleaning servants trade gossip for better work assignments, improved food rations, and protection from punishment when they make mistakes. But the most dangerous servants are the personal attendants assigned to higher-ranked concubines, because these women have direct access to information about imperial preferences, political developments, and changes in palace policy that affect all concubines. They're also the most likely to be recruited as spies and assassins by various factions within the palace hierarchy, which means they're constantly evaluating every interaction for its potential intelligence value or its usefulness for eliminating competition. The relationship between concubines and servants creates a complex web of dependencies and antagonisms that makes daily life even more stressful than it would be with simple direct oppression. You need the servants' cooperation to maintain your appearance, health, and basic living conditions, but you can't trust them because they have incentives to betray you and authority to punish you for minor infractions. Every interaction with servants becomes a careful negotiation where you try to get the assistance you need without providing them with information or opportunities they can use against you later. This extends to seemingly innocent activities like requesting extra soap for washing, asking for help with complicated clothing fastenings, or seeking information about palace schedules and procedures. Any request can be interpreted as evidence of discontent, vanity, or plotting, depending on the servant's mood and their current relationship with palace authorities. The safest approach is to minimize interaction with servants as much as possible, but this makes daily life even more difficult and isolating than it already is. The servant hierarchy also creates opportunities for exploitation and abuse, because servants who outrank you in practical authority can demand personal favors, sexual services, or valuable possessions in exchange for performing their assigned duties properly. Refusing these demands results in deliberate poor service, false reports to eunuchs about your behavior, and sometimes direct physical punishment administered by servants who claim to be correcting your attitude problems. The most common form of servant abuse involves food service, where kitchen workers demand sexual favors in exchange for adequate meal portions or improved food quality. Since you're already malnourished and constantly hungry, the temptation to comply with these demands is enormous. But compliance creates ongoing vulnerability to escalating demands and eventual betrayal when the servant decides that maintaining the arrangement is no longer in their interest. Laundry servants frequently demand valuable items like jewelry, hair ornaments, or personal possessions in exchange for properly cleaning your clothing or returning it in good condition. Since your possessions are limited and replacement items are difficult to obtain, losing personal belongings to servant demands can have serious consequences for your ability to maintain required appearance standards, which leads to punishment from eunuchs for failing to meet grooming requirements. Personal care servants often demand that concubines perform menial labor like cleaning their quarters, preparing their meals, or providing massage and grooming services as payment for assistance with daily needs. This creates situations where you're simultaneously serving and being served by the same person, with the power dynamic shifting constantly depending on who needs what from whom at any given moment. The psychological impact of these servant relationships is particularly damaging because they destroy any sense of dignity or status you might have retained despite your overall situation. Being abused by people who are theoretically your social inferiors reinforces the message that you have no value or worth beyond your potential usefulness to others. It also eliminates any possibility of finding allies or support among the palace staff. The same because everyone is competing for limited resources and opportunities within an oppressive system. The seasonal variations in palace life add another dimension of suffering because the building's heating and cooling systems are designed to accommodate imperial comfort rather than the needs of hundreds of concubines living in cramped quarters throughout the complex. Winter brings freezing temperatures that penetrate the thin walls of your cell and make sleeping difficult even with multiple layers of bedding. The heating system consists of braziers filled with charcoal that produce more smoke than warmth and frequently cause respiratory problems for concubines housed in poorly ventilated areas. Summer heat is even worse because the palace's stone construction turns the building into an oven that traps hot air and humidity while providing no relief from the oppressive temperatures. Your silk clothing becomes a sweat-soaked torture device that clings to your skin and chafes with every movement. The lack of air circulation in the concubine quarters means that the smell of unwashed bodies, chamber pots, and rotting food becomes overwhelming during hot weather, creating conditions that would be considered uninhabitable by modern standards. The seasonal changes also affect food quality and availability, because the palace's food storage and preservation systems are inadequate for maintaining large quantities of perishable items. Winter foods consist mainly of preserved vegetables, dried grains, and salted meat that's often spoiled by the time it reaches your meal bowl. Summer foods spoil quickly in the heat, leading to frequent cases of food poisoning among concubines who have no choice but to eat whatever they're given regardless of its condition. Seasonal clothing changes are handled by the palace bureaucracy according to rigid schedules that don't account for actual weather conditions or individual needs. You might be required to wear heavy winter robes during warm autumn weather or light summer garments during cold spring temperatures because the clothing distribution follows the calendar rather than the thermometer. The clothing itself is stored in damp warehouses where it develops mold, insect infestations, and unpleasant odors during off-seasons. So seasonal clothing changes often involve putting on garments that are more uncomfortable than what you're replacing. The palace's seasonal festivals and celebrations create additional hardships for concubines because these events require extensive preparation, increased work assignments, and modified daily schedules that disrupt whatever routine you've managed to establish. Festival preparations involve cleaning and decorating palace areas that are normally ignored, preparing special foods that you're not allowed to eat, and performing ceremonial duties that have no meaning beyond demonstrating subservience to imperial authority. During festivals, your already limited food rations are often reduced further because palace resources are redirected toward elaborate banquets and celebrations that concubines are not permitted to attend. You might spend days preparing festival foods while surviving on rice water and stale bread, watching servants carry elaborate dishes to dining halls where imperial guests enjoy luxury meals, while you wonder if you'll receive any food at all that day. The increased security and surveillance during festivals also means more restrictions on movement, communication, and basic activities. Palace guards are more numerous and alert during celebrations, making it even more dangerous to violate rules or engage in unauthorized activities. The eunuchs become more vigilant about enforcing discipline and protocol, using festival periods as opportunities to crack down on any signs of discontent or resistance among the concubine population. Festival clothing requirements often involve wearing ceremonial garments that are even more uncomfortable and restrictive than daily wear, including elaborate headdresses that cause neck strain, decorative accessories that dig into your skin, and shoes that make walking nearly impossible. You're required to maintain perfect posture and serene expressions during long ceremonial periods while wearing these torturous outfits, with punishment for any signs of discomfort or fatigue. And then there are the special festival duties that require concubines to participate in ceremonial activities, designed to demonstrate imperial power and prosperity. These might involve standing motionless for hours during imperial processions, performing synchronized dances while wearing uncomfortable costumes, or participating in religious ceremonies that have no relevance to your actual beliefs or interests. The festival duties are unpaid additional work that's added to your regular daily assignments, meaning longer working hours and less time for rest or personal needs. The most degrading festival activity involves the annual imperial inspection, where all concubines are lined up for the emperor to review like livestock at a market. You're required to stand perfectly still while wearing your most elaborate clothing and makeup, trying to look attractive and available, while knowing that the emperor's attention could either improve your life dramatically or destroy it completely depending on his mood and preferences. The inspection process involves hours of preparation, followed by minutes of actual imperial attention, during which you're not allowed to speak, move, or show any personality beyond serene availability. The emperor walks past hundreds of concubines, occasionally stopping to examine someone more closely or ask questions about their background and qualifications. Being selected for closer inspection is terrifying because it might lead to imperial favor or to punishment if the emperor finds something displeasing about your appearance or demeanor. Most concubines are completely ignored during the annual inspection, which is somehow both a relief and a devastating reminder of their insignificance in the imperial system. Being passed over confirms that you're not attractive or interesting enough to merit imperial attention, but it also means you won't face the risks that come with being noticed. The psychological impact of being systematically ignored by the person whose approval determines your entire fate is another form of torture that erodes self-worth and hope over time. The post-festival period brings its own challenges because the letdown from the temporary excitement and disruption of routine often triggers depression and despair among concubines who realize that the festival changes nothing about their fundamental situation. The extra work and stress of festival preparation, combined with reduced food and sleep, leaves everyone physically exhausted and emotionally depleted, just as daily routines resume their normal oppressive patterns. The festival aftermath period is also when the palace administration conducts its annual review of concubine performance and behavior, which determines promotions, demotions, and eliminations from the system. This review process involves examining detailed records kept by the eunuchs throughout the year, documenting every infraction, every moment of excellence, and every sign of potential or decline in each concubine's value to the imperial household. Your performance file, maintained by head eunuch Chun, contains entries like Day 47. Subject failed to maintain perfect posture during morning prayers, showed signs of fatigue. Day 132. Subject's fingernails measured 1 1/8 inches, exceeding regulation length by 1/8 inch. Day 203. Subject was observed speaking quietly to concubine Wu during tea service. Possible unauthorized communication. These microscopic observations accumulate over months into a comprehensive portrait of your worthiness or unworthiness. The review process culminates in individual meetings, where you're brought before a panel of senior eunuchs who read selections from your file and ask you to explain or justify your behavior. These meetings are designed to be intimidating and humiliating, with you kneeling on wooden floors, while elderly men discuss your personal failures and character defects as if you weren't present in the room. The questions they ask are impossible to answer correctly because they're designed to reveal character flaws regardless of your response. Why did you fail to show sufficient enthusiasm during the Dragon Boat Festival preparations? If you say you were enthusiastic, you're contradicting their official observations. If you admit to insufficient enthusiasm, you're confessing to a serious attitude problem. If you explain that you were tired from extra work assignments, you're making excuses and showing disrespect for imperial generosity. The most terrifying aspect of the annual review is that the criteria for evaluation change from year to year based on current imperial preferences and political considerations. Skills and behaviors that were praised in previous years might be criticized this year if the emperor's tastes have shifted or if palace politics have created new priorities. You could spend months perfecting your calligraphy only to discover that this year's review emphasizes musical ability. Or you could focus on improving your appearance only to learn that intellectual accomplishments are now more important. The review results determine not just your immediate fate, but your long-term prospects within the palace system. Concubines who receive excellent reviews might be promoted one rank, gaining access to better living conditions and improved treatment. Those who receive poor reviews face demotion, transfer to punishment duties, or complete elimination from the system through methods that are never explicitly described, but always final. But even receiving a good review creates new problems, because advancement in the concubine hierarchy increases the danger from other women who view your success as a threat to their own survival. Moving up one rank means you now have enemies among the women you've surpassed, as well as competition from those still trying to reach your new level. The higher you climb in the system, the more people have incentives to destroy you. And then there's the education system, because apparently being miserable and malnourished isn't enough. You also need to be culturally refined according to imperial standards. Daily lessons cover topics like classical poetry, traditional music, proper conversation techniques, and the intricate details of imperial etiquette that govern every aspect of behavior in the emperor's presence. The poetry lessons involve memorizing thousands of classical Chinese poems that celebrate imperial virtues, natural beauty, and the joys of servitude. You're required to recite these poems from memory with perfect pronunciation and appropriate emotional expression, which means spending hours practicing the same verses until your voice gives out. The poems themselves are beautiful in a theoretical sense, but their beauty becomes torture when you're forced to repeat them endlessly while hungry, tired, and desperate. The poetry instructor is an elderly eunuch named Master Liu, who lost his ability to speak above a whisper after years of reciting classical literature in freezing palace halls. He communicates mostly through facial expressions and bamboo stick gestures, tapping out rhythms on your shoulders when your recitation timing is wrong, and striking your knuckles when your pronunciation is imperfect. His teaching method involves repetition, criticism, and occasional moments of unexpected kindness that are somehow more disturbing than consistent cruelty. Music lessons focus on traditional instruments like the guqin, pipa, and various flutes that require years of practice to master and produce sounds that are pleasant only to people who've been trained to appreciate their subtle tonal variations. Your fingers aren't suited for string instruments, your breathing isn't controlled enough for wind instruments, and your sense of rhythm has been destroyed by months of irregular sleep and constant anxiety. The music instructor, Master Zhang, is a former court musician who was castrated after being caught in a relationship with a minor imperial concubine. He approaches music education with the fury of someone whose life's passion has been turned into a weapon against people he should sympathize with. His lessons involve physical manipulation of your hands and breathing that borders on assault, justified as necessary instruction in proper technique. The conversation lessons might be the most surreal aspect of your education because they involve learning how to talk to someone you'll never meet about topics that don't interest him using language. That sounds like it was designed by people who've never had an actual conversation. You practice discussing the weather in 17 different ways that express appropriate levels of deference, gratitude, and enthusiasm for meteorological phenomena. The conversation instructor, Master Wang, speaks in the artificially refined dialect used in imperial court, which sounds like regular Chinese filtered through several layers of pretension and fear. He corrects your pronunciation constantly, demanding that you speak with the precise tonal variations that indicate proper respect for imperial authority. Every sentence must be structured to demonstrate your awareness of your inferior social position, while avoiding any hint of resentment or dissatisfaction. But the most psychologically damaging aspect of the education system is that it's designed to create the illusion of self-improvement, while actually destroying your sense of individual identity. The skills you're learning aren't meant to enrich your life or expand your capabilities. They're meant to make you a more appealing ornament for imperial display, like teaching a parrot to recite poetry or training a dog to walk on its hind legs. The educational process systematically eliminates any thoughts, preferences, or characteristics that might interfere with your function as a decorative object. Your natural speaking voice is replaced with artificial court dialect. Your personal aesthetic preferences are overridden by imperial beauty standards. Your individual personality is buried under layers of prescribed responses and approved emotions. Even your memories are gradually erased through the constant repetition of imperial propaganda disguised as cultural education. The poems you memorize celebrate imperial wisdom and benevolence so repetitively that they begin to overwrite your actual memories of family, home, and life before the palace. The music you learn to play expresses emotions you're supposed to feel rather than emotions you actually experience. The conversation techniques you practice involve discussing topics that interest the emperor while avoiding any mention of subjects that might remind you of your previous identity. You learn to talk about palace gardens without mentioning the fields where your family worked, to discuss imperial history without referencing the village where you grew up, to express gratitude for your current situation without acknowledging the life that was taken from you. The education also includes practical training in sexual techniques, but this instruction is delivered through such layers of euphemism and metaphor that it's nearly impossible to understand what's actually being taught. The lessons involve discussions of harmonious energy exchange and cultivation of imperial satisfaction. That sound more like mystical philosophy than practical guidance for sexual encounters. The sexual education instructor is an elderly woman who was once a high-ranking concubine herself and speaks about intimate matters with the clinical detachment of someone describing agricultural techniques. She demonstrates proper positioning using wooden figures and silk diagrams while maintaining the pretense that these activities are spiritual practices rather than physical acts designed to produce male heirs. The most disturbing aspect of the sexual education is that it treats your body as a collection of tools and resources, rather than as part of a complete human being. Different body parts are discussed in terms of their utility for imperial pleasure, their potential for producing sons, and their maintenance requirements for long-term service. The instruction focuses on managing the emperor's satisfaction, rather than your own experience or well-being. You learn techniques for simulating pleasure you don't feel, expressing enthusiasm you don't have, and maintaining performance standards even when you're ill, injured, or emotionally devastated. The sexual education assumes that your personal feelings about intimate contact are irrelevant and potentially problematic, requiring management and suppression rather than consideration or respect. The medical aspects of sexual education focus on maximizing fertility and minimizing the risk of sexually transmitted diseases that might affect imperial health. You learn to monitor your reproductive cycle obsessively, recognize signs of pregnancy immediately, and maintain genital hygiene, according to standards that are both impossibly high and completely impractical, given the limited washing facilities available to lower-ranked concubines. The pregnancy preparation includes detailed instructions for prenatal behavior, designed to increase the likelihood of producing male offspring. These instructions are based on traditional Chinese medicine theories about gender, determination that involve dietary restrictions, physical positioning, timing of conception, and mental exercises that are supposed to influence the developing child's sex. The dietary restrictions during pregnancy preparation are severe enough to cause malnutrition in women who are already underfed. You're required to avoid foods that are considered cold in traditional medicine, which includes most vegetables, fruits, and proteins that would actually provide essential nutrients. The approved pregnancy diet consists mainly of rice, ginger, and special herbal preparations that taste minimal nutritional value. The physical, like boiled weeds, and provide positioning requirements involve sleeping, sitting, and moving conception, but actually just cause back pain in ways that are supposed to create optimal conditions for male joint problems and muscle strain. You're required to sleep on your right side, sit with a particular gait that looks with your feet positioned at specific angles, and walk dignified but makes normal movement impossible. The mental exercises involve meditation and visualization techniques designed to focus your thoughts on producing male children while eliminating any desires or concerns that might interfere with reproductive success. These exercises require you to spend hours each day contemplating your duty to provide imperial heirs while suppressing any personal feelings about pregnancy, childbirth, or motherhood that don't align with palace priorities. But perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of the sexual and reproductive education is that it treats potential motherhood as a competitive performance rather than a natural biological process. You're taught to view pregnancy as an opportunity to outperform other concubines rather than as a significant personal experience that will fundamentally change your life and identity. The education system creates artificial competition between concubines by ranking their rank, performance in various subjects, and using these rankings to determine privileges, punishments, and opportunities for advancement. Women who excel at poetry might receive better food rations, while those who struggle with music lessons face extended practice sessions that cut into their already limited rest time. The competitive element destroys any possibility of genuine friendship or mutual support, Among concubines, because helping someone else succeed might mean sacrificing your own opportunities for advancement. The education system deliberately creates situations where cooperation is punished and sabotage is rewarded, ensuring that concubines remain isolated and suspicious of each other. The testing process for educational subjects involves public demonstrations where concubines perform for panels of eunuchs who evaluate their skills and assign scores that affect their status within the palace hierarchy. These performances are designed to be humiliating as well as evaluative, with concubines required to demonstrate their abilities while wearing uncomfortable ceremonial clothing and maintaining perfect posture despite physical discomfort. The poetry recitations take place in rooms with poor acoustics, where you're required to project your voice clearly while maintaining the whispered tones considered appropriate for feminine speech. The musical performances involve playing instruments that haven't been properly maintained, while sitting in positions that restrict breathing and finger movement. The conversation demonstrations require you to discuss assigned topics with eunuchs, who interrupt constantly and criticize your responses as inadequate or inappropriate. The scoring system for educational performance is deliberately opaque and inconsistent, making it impossible to predict which behaviors or skills will be rewarded and which will be punished. The same performance that earns praise one day might result in criticism the next, depending on the evaluator's mood, current palace politics, or changes in imperial preferences that haven't been officially announced. The education records become part of your permanent file and are reviewed whenever decisions are made about promotions, demotions, work assignments, medical care, or elimination from the palace system. Poor educational performance can result in reduced food rations, increased work duties, assignment to unpleasant living quarters, or exclusion from opportunities for imperial attention that might improve your circumstances. Even excellent educational performance creates problems because it can be interpreted as evidence of dangerous intelligence or inappropriate ambition. Concubines who demonstrate too much learning or skill might be viewed as potential threats to palace security, leading to increased surveillance and restrictions on their activities. The education system punishes both failure and success, creating a situation where any level of performance can be used to justify harsh treatment. And let's discuss the palace's approach to religious and spiritual life, because apparently your soul needs to be controlled just as thoroughly as your body and mind. The official palace religion involves a complex mixture of Confucian philosophy, Taoist mysticism, Buddhist meditation, and imperial ancestor worship that's been carefully edited to support absolute monarchy and eliminate any concepts that might encourage independent thinking. Your daily religious obligations include morning prayers, thanking the emperor for allowing you to exist, afternoon meditation sessions focused on accepting your predetermined fate, and evening rituals that involve burning incense while contemplating your unworthiness to breathe the same air as imperial family members. These religious activities are mandatory and monitored by eunuchs who take notes on your level of spiritual enthusiasm and report any signs of insufficient devotion. The prayers you're required to recite are specifically written to reinforce your subordinate status and eliminate any sense of personal worth or individual agency. You pray for the emperor's health, wisdom, and continued success while asking forgiveness for your inherent inferiority and expressing gratitude for the privilege of serving imperial interests. The prayers contain no requests for personal well-being, family safety, or improvement in your circumstances because such concerns are considered selfish and inappropriate. The meditation sessions involve sitting in uncomfortable positions for extended periods while focusing your thoughts on accepting suffering as natural and deserved. The meditation techniques are designed to suppress anger, resentment, hope, and other emotions that might motivate resistance to your circumstances. You're taught to view pain, hunger, and fear as spiritual lessons that will purify your soul and prepare you for whatever afterlife awaits people who have served imperial power faithfully. The religious instruction includes detailed descriptions of the various hells that await people who fail to demonstrate proper reverence for imperial authority. These hell descriptions are graphic enough to cause nightmares and are specifically designed to terrorize you into compliance with palace rules through fear of eternal punishment. The religious instructors spend considerable time explaining exactly what kinds of torture await disobedient concubines in the afterlife, with particular emphasis on punishments for sexual impropriety, disrespectful thoughts, and insufficient gratitude. The ancestor worship component of palace religion involves honoring imperial ancestors while completely ignoring your own family history and cultural traditions. You're required to memorize the names and accomplishments of dozens of previous emperors, while being forbidden to mention your parents, grandparents, or any aspect of your personal heritage. The message is clear. Your spiritual identity begins and ends with service to the imperial dynasty. The religious calendar includes numerous feast days and holy occasions that require special observances, additional prayers, and modified daily routines. These religious holidays always involve more work and less food for concubines, who are required to prepare ceremonial items, clean sacred spaces, and participate in rituals while fasting to demonstrate spiritual discipline. The feast days are called feast days because the imperial family and high-ranking officials enjoy elaborate meals while everyone else goes hungry in honor of spiritual purification. The most disturbing aspect of palace religion is that it systematically destroys any sense of inherent human dignity or worth by teaching that your value as a person depends entirely on your usefulness to imperial power. The religious instruction emphasizes that you have no independent spiritual significance, and that your soul's fate in the afterlife will be determined by how well you served imperial interests during your earthly existence. The religious education also includes instruction in fortune-telling and divination techniques that are used to justify palace policies and predict imperial preferences. You learn to read tea leaves, interpret bird flights, and analyze dream symbolism according to methods that always support whatever conclusions the palace authorities want to reach. These divination skills are not meant to provide genuine spiritual insight, but to create the appearance of supernatural support for imperial decisions. The fortune-telling instruction includes specific techniques for predicting which concubines will produce male heirs, when the emperor might be receptive to sexual encounters, and what behaviors are most likely to earn imperial favor. These predictions are based on traditional Chinese astrology and numerology systems that have been modified to support palace propaganda and eliminate any possibilities that might suggest criticism of imperial policies. You're also taught to interpret dreams and omens in ways that reinforce your acceptance of your current situation and discourage any thoughts of escape or rebellion. Dream interpretation techniques focus on finding spiritual meanings that justify suffering and promote gratitude for imperial benevolence. Omens and signs are analyzed according to methods that always conclude that the current system is divinely ordained and that resistance to imperial authority is spiritually dangerous. The religious instruction includes detailed study of imperial genealogy and the divine origins of imperial power, with particular emphasis on the emperor's connection to celestial forces and his role as the Son of Heaven. You memorize complex theological arguments that prove the emperor's absolute authority over all aspects of human life, including the right to determine who lives or dies based on imperial whim rather than moral considerations. The theological education also covers the spiritual significance of concubinage itself, with religious instructors explaining how serving as an imperial concubine purifies your soul and elevates your spiritual status despite the obvious misery of your daily existence. The religious justification for the concubine system presents sexual servitude as a form of sacred duty comparable to becoming a nun or priest, just with different vows and obligations. The most psychologically damaging aspect of palace religion is that it reframes every form of abuse and exploitation as spiritual education, designed to improve your character and prepare your soul for higher purposes. Physical punishment becomes divine correction, starvation becomes purification, sexual exploitation becomes sacred service, and psychological torture becomes spiritual strengthening. The religious education systematically eliminates any concepts of universal human rights, personal autonomy, or individual worth that might conflict with imperial authority. You're taught that questioning palace policies is equivalent to questioning divine will, that seeking personal happiness is spiritually selfish, and that any desire for freedom or dignity represents dangerous pride that must be suppressed through prayer and meditation. The religious framework also provides justification for the harsh treatment of concubines by presenting suffering as spiritually beneficial and pleasure as morally corrupting. The religious instructors explain that comfortable living conditions would weaken your spiritual discipline, that adequate food would promote gluttony and laziness, and that freedom from fear would prevent the humility necessary for spiritual growth. Even death within the palace system is presented as spiritually advantageous because it represents the ultimate form of service to imperial power. Concubines who die from malnutrition, disease, punishment, or suicide are described as having achieved spiritual purification through sacrifice, with their deaths serving as inspiration for other women to accept their circumstances with greater faith and resignation. The religious instruction includes specific prayers and meditation techniques for accepting death peacefully when your time comes, with emphasis on dying in ways that don't inconvenience palace operations or create negative publicity for the imperial system. You learn to pray for a death that demonstrates proper gratitude for your time in imperial service while avoiding any expressions of complaint or criticism that might reflect poorly on palace management. And speaking of death, let's address the elephant in the room that nobody talks about directly, but everyone understands perfectly. The palace has a remarkably efficient system for disposing of concubines who become inconvenient, and this system operates with the same bureaucratic precision that governs every other aspect of imperial administration. The official records never mention executions, assassinations, or systematic elimination of unwanted concubines. Instead, they refer to natural deaths from illness, tragic accidents, spiritual transitions, and departures for family obligations. The euphemistic language creates plausible deniability while making it clear to everyone involved that certain behaviors or circumstances will result in permanent removal from the system. The most common cause of natural death among concubines is a mysterious wasting illness that affects women who have fallen out of imperial favor or been accused of various infractions. This illness involves gradual weight loss, weakness, and eventual organ failure that medical examination reveals to be consistent with slow poisoning using substances that are difficult to detect and impossible to treat with traditional Chinese medicine. The poisoning process is handled by palace physicians who have extensive knowledge of toxic plants, minerals, and animal venoms that can be administered in small doses over extended periods to create the appearance of natural illness. The poisons are typically mixed into food, medicine, or cosmetics in quantities too small to cause immediate symptoms, but sufficient to cause cumulative damage that eventually proves fatal. The tragic accidents that befall problematic concubines usually involve falls from high places, drowning in palace ponds, or crushing injuries from falling building materials during construction projects. These accidents always occur when the victims are alone or in the company of people who report remarkably similar versions of events that emphasize the accidental nature of the deaths while providing no useful details about what actually happened. The spiritual transitions category covers suicides that may or may not be voluntary, depending on the circumstances that led to the decision to end one's life. Palace records indicate that concubines sometimes choose to hang themselves, drown themselves, or consume poison rather than face punishment for serious infractions. But the distinction, the available documentation. The departures for family obligations. Euphemism covers situations between voluntary suicide and assisted. Suicide is often unclear, from where concubines are removed from the palace and relocated to places where their continued existence won't create problems for imperial administration. These relocations typically involve remote monasteries, isolated rural areas, or overseas territories where former concubines can live out the remaining years in obscurity and poverty. But the most efficient elimination method doesn't require poison, accidents, or relocation. It simply involves reducing food rations, medical care, and basic living conditions until natural causes complete the process. This approach has the advantage of being completely deniable because malnutrition and disease are common problems in the palace system, making it easy to explain individual deaths as unfortunate but unavoidable consequences of the challenging lifestyle. The selection process for elimination is based on a complex algorithm that considers factors like age, health status, rank within the concubine hierarchy, potential for causing political problems, and resource consumption relative to potential imperial value. Women who are too old to bear children, too sick to perform assigned duties, too rebellious to manage safely, or too expensive to maintain are systematically identified and processed according to established protocols. The elimination process is handled by specialized palace staff who have been carefully selected for their discretion, loyalty, and emotional detachment from the human cost of their work. These staff members operate under strict confidentiality agreements and are rotated frequently to prevent them from developing personal relationships with concubines who might be targeted for removal. The psychological impact of the elimination system on surviving concubines is profound because everyone understands the threat without it ever being explicitly acknowledged. The constant disappearance of women creates an atmosphere of terror that's more effective than direct threats because it operates through uncertainty and imagination rather than specific warnings that might be challenged or appealed. The elimination system also serves as a population control mechanism that prevents the concubine population from growing beyond the palace's capacity to house, feed, and manage large numbers of women. The system maintains an optimal balance between having enough concubines to provide imperial choice and entertainment while avoiding the logistical and security problems that would result from excessive numbers. The administrative efficiency of the elimination system reflects the same attention to detail and systematic approach that characterizes other aspects of palace management. Deaths are documented, resources are reallocated, living spaces are reassigned, and personal possessions are redistributed according to established procedures that minimize disruption to daily operations. The elimination records are maintained in confidential files that track patterns, methods, and outcomes to ensure that the system operates effectively without creating unnecessary attention or criticism from outside observers. The record keeping includes analysis of which elimination methods are most cost-effective, which create the least administrative burden, and which are most likely to be accepted without question by surviving concubines. The system also includes provisions for eliminating witnesses or participants who might pose security risks by revealing information about elimination methods or specific cases. Palace staff who handle elimination duties are themselves subject to periodic removal if they show signs of developing moral objections, emotional problems, or security concerns that might compromise the system's operation. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the elimination system is its integration into normal palace, routine in ways that make mass murder seem like routine maintenance. The disappearance of concubines is treated as a natural part of the palace ecosystem, like seasonal changes or equipment replacement, rather than as the systematic destruction of human lives. The elimination system operates with the same bureaucratic detachment that governs other palace functions, with forms to fill out, procedures to follow, and performance metrics to meet. The people who implement the system view it as professional duty rather than moral choice, which allows them to participate in mass murder while maintaining their self-image as loyal civil servants, doing necessary work for imperial security. And that brings us to the final horror of concubine life, which isn't any single abuse or cruelty, but the systematic destruction of hope itself. The palace system is designed not just to control your body and behavior, but to eliminate any possibility that you might imagine, a different kind of existence, or believe that change is possible. Every aspect of your daily routine reinforces the message that your current situation is permanent, inevitable, and deserved. The ranking system creates artificial goals that keep you focused on minor improvements within the system, rather than questioning the system itself. The education program fills your mind with imperial propaganda, while eliminating access to information or ideas that might inspire resistance. The isolation from family and outside world prevents you from maintaining connections to alternative values or ways of life, might sustain hope for eventual freedom. The constant surveillance and punishment create an environment where even private thoughts become dangerous, forcing you to police your own mind and eliminate any mental content that might be interpreted as disloyal or problematic. The religious instruction provides spiritual justification for your suffering, while promising that acceptance and submission will be rewarded in an afterlife that may or may not exist. The medical system ensures that physical pain and illness become constant companions that drain your energy and make sustained resistance impossible. The elimination system creates a climate of terror where disappearance is always possible but never predictable, keeping you in a state of constant anxiety that prevents long-term planning or emotional investment in your own future. The administrative efficiency of the palace bureaucracy makes your individual existence seem insignificant and replaceable within a larger system that will continue operating regardless of what happens to any particular person. The most sophisticated aspect of the hope destruction process is that it operates through small daily defeats rather than dramatic, crushing moments. Each morning inspection, it finds fault with your appearance. Each meal that leaves you hungry. Each lesson that emphasizes your ignorance. Each interaction that reinforces your powerlessness contributes to a gradual erosion of self-worth and possibility. So there you have it. Your life as an imperial concubine, where every breath you take is regulated, every thought you think is monitored, and every hope you dare to harbor, it's systematically crushed by people who've turned cruelty into an art form. You wake up each morning to bamboo sticks and jade rulers, spend your days getting your face painted with beetle paste and your hair burned with hot metal combs, and go to sleep knowing that tomorrow will be exactly the same, assuming you survive the night. The truly disturbing part isn't any single horror, though there are plenty to choose from. It's how normal all of this became, how an entire civilization convinced itself that treating women like decorative livestock was not just acceptable, but spiritually necessary. Thousands of women lived and died in those silk-draped cells, and most of history forgot they ever existed. But their stories matter, if only to remind us that sometimes the most disturbing things about the past aren't the dramatic battles or political upheavals, but the quiet, everyday cruelties that people learn to accept as just the way things were. Sleep well tonight, and maybe appreciate that your biggest complaint tomorrow will probably be your commute, or your coffee being too weak.